Please be seated. A lot of talk this morning about leprosy. Leprosy is a nasty disease. It affects you in so many different ways, and there's no wonder that anyone who contracts it will do desperate things to be cured of it. In fact, today there are roughly 127,000 new leprosy cases every year. At least that was the number back in 2 years ago, 2020. And so back then, of course, today there is a cure for it actually. You can actually take medicine and be cured of leprosy. But back then, the only cure was God. And as we see from the drama laid out in the Old Testament reading this morning, there's a lot to unpack, given the talk about leprosy and the measures that people were taking to be cured of it. And of course, God's intervention. We also see that in the end, all of this works for the good of Israel and to God's glory. But first we start with Naaman, the great general who had everything a person could want in life. He was a decorated commander of the king's army, and he had all the wealth and riches and acclaim that a person of his time could want. But as the saying goes, when you're healthy, you have a million problems. But when you're sick, you only have one. He had one problem that he had to try to deal with, and that was his rapidly spreading leprosy. And interestingly enough, he finds a path to a cure through a woman who he had taken in a raid. Isn't that something? Now, I don't know about you, but if someone had taken me into slavery, I wouldn't be thinking about how to cure them. I would not be thinking, that wouldn't be the first thing on my mind. But somehow or another, this young woman who had been taken into slavery decides that she is going to suggest to him that there is a cure, but he must go to see this man of God in Israel. So, a lot of crazy things happened after that. A lot of crazy things happened. The first thing is, crazy enough, she told him this, but she tells her lady who she is taking care of, which is Naaman's wife. Naaman's wife then tells Naaman, and he goes to his king and says, I'd like to test this out. I'd like to see if there's a way for me to be cured by these people. Would you help? And the king gets it all mixed up. He thinks the person that's going to cure Naaman is actually the king of Israel. So he sends a letter to the king of Israel suggesting that the king cure his man Naaman. And that's when we get into the tearing of clothes. I've never heard that phrase before. Ever heard tearing of clothes? Quentin heard about it. You people who read the Bible heard about it. But it was startling to me when I heard he tore his clothes. I had to look up what that was. I don't want anybody here to go around tearing your clothes. But tearing your clothes was a big deal. It was something that you did when you were in mourning, or when you were in grievous danger, or when you were really nervous and concerned about something major happening. So tearing of clothes was not something just to be laughed at. When somebody said they were tearing their clothes, you better listen. Maybe you better run. He was thinking that he was going to be under attack if he couldn't find a way to cure Naaman. This is what he was thinking. Oh my goodness, this guy's picking a fight with me. Doesn't he know that I'm not a god? I can't cure this man of leprosy. He's trying to use this as a pretext to come in here and raid us again. Well, good thing is that Elisha finds out, this man of God, Elisha, finds out about this tearing of clothes. And he says to him, you didn't need to tear your clothes. I got you. Just send them to me. I can take care of this leprosy thing. Not me, really, but through God, I can take care of this problem that this man has. Send him to me. So he sends him to him. Now, this is the next calamity in this passage. So he gets to him, and he comes with chariots and horses and a throng of people. And he stops right outside of this man's house. Right outside of his house. Can you imagine all this coming up to your house? He comes up to his house. And he's waiting for him to come out so that he can be cured. But he doesn't show up. He doesn't show up. He stays in his house and sends a messenger out and tells him what to do. Now this is this mighty king, this might not a king, but mighty general of one of the most powerful armies, coming to see you and you don't come out. Send a messenger. So he's outdone. The general is outdone by this. He doesn't appreciate this one bit. But the messenger tells him what he needs to do if he wants to cure this leprosy. So he can decide what he wants to do. He can decide to be upset, or he can do what he's asked to do and cure the leprosy. And fortunately, one of his soldiers appeals to him and says, look, you need to go do what they told you to do if you want to be cured of this leprosy. Don't play with this. If they were to ask you to do something harder, you would have done it. He's asking you to do something simple. Go jump in the water a few times and you'll be cured of this. So finally, he calms down and he does it. So what is all of this? All of this seemingly, when you look at it from the end, choreographed drama. Seems to me that it all kind of fits together when you look at it at the end. First of all, the king of Israel had no idea that he had a man of God in his midst. How can you be the king of Israel and not realize that you have a prophet in your country? You are the titular head of the Jewish faith, and you don't know that there's someone in here who is speaking on behalf of God. So the first lesson here is, if you're the king of a religion, you should kind of know if there's people talking to God. And I think that was one message that God was trying to deliver here. Israel, understand that I am with you. You have abandoned me. You don't even know when I send people to be with you. You've forgotten about me. The second, of course, is the lesson of the woman who shows mercy even though she's enslaved. Love your neighbor is what we come to learn later on from an act like this. Love your neighbor is what we come to learn later on. Turn your cheek is what we come to learn later on. But for now, she's setting this marvelous example of grace and concern for a human being, even when she was under enormous difficulty being someone's slave and had been taken from her family. Now, she may have had a practical reason for doing this too, because she could not have known, how could she have known that Elisha would actually cure this man of leprosy? How could she have known that? Maybe she knew it because of how she was raised. She was raised to be a faithful woman and to trust in the Lord, and that God would deliver her if she prayed and asked. Maybe that's how she knew. Maybe that's how she knew. And then, of course, there is the king. Again, we mentioned him, who is completely out of it. But what about the general? The general has now become one of the greatest allies for the Jews. The man who was raiding them time and time again, taking their people, taking their supplies and food, bringing his great army, he has now become one of the greatest allies of Jews, because he now knows that there is only one God, and it is God in Israel. So we have all of this drama going on. But as I said, it all goes to the good of Israel and to the glory of God, right? To the glory of God. So that brings us to the New Testament. The leprosy there is kind of a similar thing. We see 10 people who are desperate, basically, and no one has come up with any way to help them. And so they are on their last leg, they go to Jesus and say, help us. And of course, Jesus does. Now, I don't know. Maybe we just don't think about thanking people when we get something. Maybe sometimes we just take things for granted when we're given a blessing. But that was an amazing blessing that they got, for them to walk off and not even thank Jesus. Their death sentence was commuted, and they couldn't even think long enough to thank him. And so that gets me to thinking about me sometimes. Maybe about you too. How do we see our blessings? How do we see our blessings? Yes, there are so many things that it's very easy to take for granted. So many things. We woke up this morning. We have food at home, hopefully. We have people around us who love us. You can think of all of the blessings that you have that maybe sometimes you take for granted. There are lots of problems. We know about that. And I just wonder if sometimes we don't let our problems be our narrative. I wonder if we don't let our problems be our narrative. I wonder if sometimes we don't spend too much time thinking about what we don't have, rather than appreciating the things and the people in our lives that we do have. There's always going to be disaster. There's always going to be catastrophe. There's always going to be calamity. But along with that comes some good things too. And we can decide, we have the power to decide what we're going to recognize. Doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge the pain and the suffering that's around us too. But there are blessings. And it's for us, I think, to acknowledge those blessings and to especially appreciate from which those blessings come. Amen. And I think we have a hymn that we're going to sing together with the ladies. So, this hymn is called God Has Smiled on Me. And I think it's fitting given the talk that I just gave. So we'll sing it together. God has smiled on me, yes, He has set me free. Yeah, God has smiled on me, yes, good to me. God has smiled on me. He has set me free. God has smiled on me. Yes, He's been good to me. He is the source of all my joy. He fills me with His love. The grace that I employ, He sends down from above. God has smiled on me, yes, He has set me free. God has smiled on me, yeah, good to me. Unto my path is He, my strength when I would fall. The grace each day for me. Oh, God is my all in all. So help me sing it. God has smiled on me, yes, He has set me free. God has, He smiled on me, yes, He's been good to me. God has smiled on me.